If you want to be a parent, I would say you need to spend at least 2 years researching, learning about, practicing things around birth, pregnancy, and parenting. Obviously, not everyone is that privileged to be able to spend that much time and energy learning about these things, but the outcomes are better if you know what you're doing, or at least if you learn more and more about what research says and what other people's experience says. And it's difficult because it's not like I don't want to shame any parents that went into it not knowing, hadn't had a clue. And I would like to fight back against the culture that says not having a clue what you're doing when you're doing all this stuff is advisable, which is what the culture says, in my opinion. I don't think that's advisable. And a lot of research agrees with me. So when people work with doulas, a lot of difficulties around birth reduces. And, you know, if you don't know what you're doing and you assume going to a hospital is good for you, again, research shows that that's not the case. When I didn't know anything about birth, I was like, yeah, I'm going to have a cesarean. And little did I know a lot of the risks and the harms of going in a medical settings can have, and not being relaxed. And yeah, there's just so much that learning about stuff will help you with. Birthing people is a sacred process. It is something that we need to get right if we're ever going to do it, and if we can do it and want to. Obviously, there's like the larger question of children in this world, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I don't know if I want to have kids. I don't even know if I can have kids. I haven't had any of this kind of checked out or figured out. But what I do know is that loads of women and femme people and birthing people get absolutely traumatized in the birthing system. I know that a lot of the NHS and the medical establishment is steeped in patriarchal norms, and even though people like midwives and the medical establishment in midwifery and in birthing work in the NHS mean the best, the structures around them are inherently damaging to birthing people. So a lot of the general practices of birth is it's really causing unnecessary pain to both the baby and the birthing person a lot of the time. Not all the time, but things like having a due date that you have to be very specific about, and then worrying about it if it doesn't happen on that date. Obviously, within reason, but birthing dates are basically bullshit, okay? Your baby's gonna arrive when it arrives. Obviously, there's different story when it's like super, super, super early. Yeah, in general, birthing dates are bullshit. And so much stress is created around that within the medical establishment. Another thing is cesareans. A lot of the time, the staff will try to encourage the birthing person to have a cesarean, even when they don't need to, because it suits their schedules more, and because we live in a capitalist system, and also it can protect them legally as well if they have a cesarean when there's like slightly something different compared to some other births, for example. So it really doesn't protect the birthing person. A lot of research shows that birthing in hospitals actually increase the risks of harm to birthing person and baby. That's not surprising when the person needs to be relaxed when they're birthing. Otherwise, the blood doesn't go to the uterus, which is what they need to push the baby out, causing pain if they're struggling to do that because the blood is not going to the uterus. It's so on and so forth. There's just so much that people need to learn in advance, and we're talking like everyone involved ideally. So like, even if you're not going to birth anyone, even if you're never going to be a parent, you have been birthed, and you have parent friends, and you have family members that have kids potentially, and or that are pregnant and or are thinking of having kids. And the fact that we just accept that birthing people are just going to get extremely traumatized, maybe even assaulted in birth, sometimes sexually assaulted in birth, is horrific. It's horrific. And it's like the epitome of misogyny and patriarchy. And my life has been fucked up by birthing people who have really been traumatized by the birthing experience in my own family. And it can be lifelong. The impact on your kids, if you are screwed up in birth, can be lifelong, and it's devastating, not just for the birthing person. And I'm not going to do that if I'm ever going to birth someone, or at least I'm going to do whatever I can to avoid that. So dads need to learn, like second mums need to learn, and non-binary parents need to learn. Everyone needs to learn if they're going to go on this sacred journey, okay? one thing that seems to be important is just preparing yourself for the fact that it is going to be extremely hard to care for kids in this wider system as well. And also prepare yourself that your kids might be disabled, have learning difficulties, they might have high needs disability wise. A lot of the time people just assume that's not going to happen, but that may well happen, and you need to like unlearn ableism, and you need to cultivate healthy ways of relating to those kids if they arrive, and celebrate them and support them as much as you can. And then you also need to work out if you're able to have the energy and the love and the support that whoever arrives needs. Yeah, and there's a lot to think about for everyone involved. And so learning about birth and parenting and pregnancy is super liberating, and it's super amazing, and it's fascinating, and it gives me hope, and it gives me more love for my body. Even if I never go on that journey, I'm just like, well, I'm badass. Like the more you learn about it, the more fun, the more enjoyable, the more proud, the more liberated I feel. And that's precisely because the wider structure is steeped in capitalism, colonialism, and patriarchy. And it's devastating. It's devastating. Like, it's devastating. The amount of harm that the birthing institutions do to people is deplorable. It's like the epitome of depravity, really. And a lot of the knowledge of people that had natural, local, community-centered healing and herbal support and medical support, that was community focused and nature focused, a lot of them were wiped out with burning the witches in, I think, the 17th century. So a lot of that knowledge was decimated on purpose, I would argue, for that medical knowledge to go to the establishment, and it started to be dominated by men and so on and so forth. Yeah, who were not following like actually advisable medical procedures, and that still happens today. Oh my god. Anyway, there's a really great design, I think it's called Nurses, Witches and Doctors, which goes into that in detail. But yeah, you get the themes that I'm saying. Please learn about it. There's lots of amazing resources that I'd really recommend that I'm going to add at the bottom of this. Even if, again, you don't go on that journey, I don't know if I will. I don't know if I have the strength, honestly. I can barely cope myself. But like, I don't know. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. Yeah, it's complicated, and it's interesting, and it's fascinating, but it is a sacred task. Okay, so treat it as such. Please treat it as such, because yeah, please just do that.